So I'm going to talk a little bit about Lucy's birth and our choices for that and what went into that. So here we go. We decided to have a home birth with Lucy, and there was a lot that went into that. That was always what I wanted at the beginning of my pregnancy. I knew that's what I wanted, and the kind of provider that I wanted was going to be a midwife. So we decided to move to Alaska because I am an Alaskan resident and I would be able to get Medicaid there because I was pregnant. Midwives in Alaska are covered by Medicaid, at least the ones I was and a couple other ones. So you had that choice up there, and I decided instead of using their birth center, I was going to do a home birth because that was where I was going to be most comfortable. I wouldn't have to worry about transporting from my house, which is 20 minutes outside of town, all the way to the birth center in the middle of labor, because that just does not sound like fun to me. We had an ultrasound with Lucy that up in Alaska. They wanted to take their own ultrasounds, and Lucy was measuring small. And because my mom goes 42 weeks or over with her babies, and so did my older sister, we wanted to give me a buffer. So we moved Lucy's due date out from the 14th to the 19th of September. And that's a 5-day difference. That's huge. As midwives, in most areas, you are not legally allowed to assist in a labor and a birth after 42 weeks gestation, which is just crap because some babies just cook longer, whatever. So we didn't want me to go over that 42-week mark, so we gave ourselves a little bit of a buffer because we had the option to with that second ultrasound. So my due date went from the 14th to the 19th, and honestly, I was content with that. I didn't want to end up in a hospital. Hospitals give me anxiety even to this day, so that was something that I really didn't want to have to do. Devin was working at the Alaska State Fair at the end of August into the 1st of September. The 5th of September, Labor Day, was his last day of work. So what he did at the fair was he walked around with a little trash picker and picked up trash. So I didn't have anything else to do. So all day long, I would walk with Devin around the fair. I wasn't expecting to go into labor until at 42 weeks. It was just nowhere in my head that was going to happen at all. So we were walking around and we would often come home super late because he worked until the end of the fair. He worked from like 8 a.m. in the morning until 11 o'clock to midnight. And it was about 50 minutes away from where we were staying. So we get home probably around midnight or something, Sunday night. We laid down in bed probably around 1, and I had been having Braxton Hicks my entire pregnancy, and I was having them pretty regularly the last couple of weeks. And I was laying in bed going, "This feels like a Braxton Hick. These are kind of regular. These are definitely more regular than they usually are." Huh. So I laid there until about 2:30. And I was like, all right, these keep coming. So I'm gonna wake up Devin. So I wake up Devin, and Devin is just like, what? I'm like, Devin, I think I might be in labor. He's so confused. He's groggy. He's like, okay, I guess. And I was like, well, we have to time the contractions for an hour. That's what my paper says. My midwife gave me a paper and was like, here are the things that might mean you're in labor, and here's what you should do. And if I had consistent contractions that were 5 to 6 minutes apart, I was supposed to call them. From 2:30 a.m. until 3:30 a.m., we had the lights on, and I was bouncing on a birthing ball and walking around and drinking cold water. So I was doing all those things, and the contractions were coming every 4 to 5 minutes. So I called my midwife at 3:30 a.m. And at this midwifery office, they forward the office number to whoever is on call at that point. And so I got my midwife, Jennifer, and she was like, you're 37 weeks, you're a first time mom. It's probably gonna taper off towards morning. If it gets to 3 to 4 minutes apart, call me back. And I was like, okay. And I was having these feelings of like, am I wrong? I wasn't in a panic or anything. I was just like, well, these contractions are coming and they're consistent and I've never had this before, but I am 37 weeks, so we'll just keep doing. And I ended up calling my mom, and Devin was setting up the birthing pool, and my dad was awake because we were technically house sitting for my parents. They had gone on a trip and my dad flew back to teach a gun class. So he was there in his room and we were in our room, and he ended up hearing us and getting up, and we were setting up the birth pool, and he was helping us figure out the water pump. And so I called my mom and we were talking. She's like, well, if you can lay down, like just try and lay down and go back to sleep. Like give yourself 30 minutes trying to go back to sleep. And I honestly couldn't lay down through one contraction. It was too uncomfortable. So I got up and I got in the bathtub, and they were trying to figure out the birth pool and all of that. And contractions started to get more intense. And to me, it felt like kind of like a really tight Braxton Hick. Or for those of you who are men or who haven't had a baby yet or haven't been able to have a baby yet, if you've ever had a Charlie horse, think about a big Charlie horse on your belly. So I was having those pretty intense contractions in the bathtub, and I was on the phone with my mom, and she was like, you need to breathe. And I was like, I am breathing. She's like, no, you need to take deep breaths. And I'm like, I am taking deep breaths. And she's like, no, you're not. And so she made me slow down and realize that I wasn't breathing through contractions. What I thought was taking a deep breath was actually this. And so I was listening to my mom, breathing or whatever, and I started to be like, I feel sick. I feel like I'm gonna throw up. I feel so nauseous. I think I actually climbed up and over the bathtub and threw up in the toilet. So I threw up into the toilet, and my mom is like, okay. And then Devin came back in, and I looked at him and I was just like, Devin, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this. I don't want to. And at this point, I'm still like, these contractions aren't that bad. Like, I was breathing through, and then my mom, like, hearing that was going, you need to call the midwife. Like, call the midwife. And so Devin called the midwife, and we eventually got me into the birth pool. And the whole thing with me staying in the bathtub for so long was that Devin had filled up the birth pool but forgot to put like the plastic cover in under it. So he had to empty out the birth pool and fill it back up. We had our own well in Alaska and our own water heater, so we had basically an endless supply of hot water, so that was great. I think he also at one point brought me like a cup full of the water and how hot it was, because I'm pretty particular about that. I like my water to be very hot when I'm in the bathtub. So he helped me walk to the bedroom, and before I got into the tub, I had another contraction. And let me tell you, contractions out of the water versus in the water are totally different. It hurt so bad. I had to sit down on the bed and I was like, ow. And then we got me in the water and I was good. Like, it was great. I loved being submerged in the water, but I was feeling so nauseous. And right about then, so the midwife shows up and she comes in and she's, watching, she's keeping quiet. We have the lights off, and she comes over and she asks if she can, use a fetal Doppler to listen to baby. And we do that, and she takes my blood pressure, and then she stands up and goes to the doorway and looks in at me and says, okay, so I'm gonna just hang out in this other bedroom I'm like, okay. But then she stops because right about then I get another contraction. And I go, and I close my eyes and I'm breathing. She looks at me and she comes back in and goes, these contractions look like they're making you work. I'm like, yeah. And she goes, do you feel pressure down there? And I go, a little bit. I honestly didn't understand how that would, like, what that would feel like. And I was like kind of sensing with my head down below, thinking, okay, what does that feel like? And I'm like, yeah, there's a little bit of pressure. And her eyes kind of go, oh, okay. And then she gets her phone out and she calls the other midwives. And she told me this later. She goes, you guys got to get here now. We're going to have a baby. Because they were stopping to get coffee because babies take time, you guys. So she showed up around 7:45 a.m. in the morning, right? So they're out getting coffee. They're thinking they're going to be there for a while. Because first-time moms, your labor is usually 12 hours or more. That's the average. Not only that, I'm only 37 weeks. And first-time moms, 41 weeks and 5 days is the average time for a mom to go in labor by herself. A first-time mom, right? So I'm totally throwing them for a loop because one, we're all like, you're 37 weeks. You're a first-time mom. You've only been in labor for a couple of hours and you're looking like you're getting pushy. So, yes. So she calls the other midwives and has them rush over. So they get there and things are getting serious. And I know at one, like they arrived and my dad looks in, I'm like leaning over the side of the birth pool, breathing deeply. Whoa! And my dad says hey, going out. So he leaves. And what he was doing is he was going to get snacks and food for the midwives. Also, he got my favorite cereal because we don't know how long I'm going to be in labor for. You usually provide those things, which I didn't know at the time. First time mom. And within a couple of minutes, like, I don't know, 10 minutes, I'm pushing. And we moved, I had been leaning over the edge and was kind of like on all fours and pushing from there. And at one point, we had a little sack of water, like a little bubble. An amniotic sac was sticking out. And then it had sprung a leak. So it was like, whoosh. And at the time I was super embarrassed and they were all giggling about it. And I was just like, oh, but whatever. You're in labor. So I'm only wearing a sports bra. They're giggling over my water going, because my water hadn't broken yet. The worst thing in the world is the pushing and the crowning. I suggest looking up the fetal ejection reflex. I did not know about that for Lucy. And that's when you breathe baby down, you don't push at all because your body actually will push by itself. But I didn't know about that. So I was pushing and I was barely pushing. I didn't like it. I didn't like the feeling of it. So I wasn't giving it my all. And I was not a fan of the feeling. So yes, I was very loud. And my midwives had to remind me that high-pitched sounds do not help with pain. It's the low, moaning, groaning sound. And I was embarrassed. I was honestly really embarrassed, but it helped a lot. Then my midwife suggested that I maybe might want to move positions, and I was like, oh, okay, fine. And I didn't do it because I wanted to. I did it because she suggested I might want to. And that's something to really consider. I honestly didn't know what good positions were. I looked up a couple different ones. So I moved and I ended up leaning against the back of the birth pool and had my knees up, right? Thinking that was a good position. I honestly didn't know. But my midwives didn't say anything, so it was fine. And within a couple of pushes, Lucy came shooting out. Like her hand was right by her face and she came out. Her hand came with her head, like Superman style. Devin was supposed to catch Lucy, but I had him by the hand and wouldn't let him go. He did not catch the baby. My midwife did, and then she handed her to me. And the first words out of my mouth were, "Why are you so tiny?" You get this like rush of emotions and hormones after birth, and I was just like, what? Why are you so tiny? And she was so small. I just couldn't believe it. I remember also like checking to see if she had all of her fingers and toes, just to make sure. Somebody took baby from me. I think it was Devin, or a midwife gave baby to them. They helped me out of the birthing tub, and I was honestly just not aware at how imbalanced I would be. I was so just like, I just wasn't aware. Like I totally, like my equilibrium was totally off. So they helped me from my my tub to my bed. So the birth pool was right next to the bed. So they helped me into the bed, and I got to hold baby, and Devin got to hold baby, and they helped me nurse her like laying down because I was way like, whoa. And then I think I was holding her when they checked to make sure I hadn't torn. I had a little bit of a labial tear, and I chose not to have it stitched. It's kind of concerning, but it wasn't enough to be like, no, you need to get this stitched, which, by the way, I don't respond well to that. Don't tell me what to do. I didn't have any tears except that small tear. They helped me breastfeed right in my bed, and they did the newborn examination right next to me. So I remember the midwife asked me, like, all right, you want to guess how much she weighs? Because she was so small. I was like, you're so tiny. And I was like, I don't know, 6 pounds? And 5 pounds, 10 ounces. And I just couldn't even. I was like, she's so tiny and small and beautiful. It was so wonderful. And they gave her right back to me. We didn't even get her dressed. I think we put a diaper on her, and she got wrapped up in a blanket and laid down next to me. And that's the picture I announced with, which I will put on here. And it was great. It was wonderful. They stayed there for a little bit, and then they gave us some paperwork and stuff, and then they went home. And we got to enjoy our sweet little baby, which is not this little baby, but you look a little bit like her. And I had family come over to my house, and I was able to lay in my own bed, and like they helped me take my first pee and all of that jazz, all of that good stuff after birth that nobody talks about, which I should do a video on because every mom deserves to know what to expect. So that was Lucy's birth, and I had her at 8:30 in the morning, which was, it was about 1:30 that I had started having contractions. So 7 hours. 7 hours start to finish. And it was awesome. It was wonderful. And I got to be home for it and had supportive, awesome midwives and a supportive, awesome husband. And my dad came home from the grocery store to a baby, which he was not expecting. He got a bunch of food for the midwives and for me. And he came home to a baby, which is like the best thing to come home to. Huh, it's the best. Lucy fell back asleep. So yeah, that is Lucy's birth story, and I know it was kind of a jumbled mess. I hope that made sense. If you have any questions, I would love to hear them, and put them in the comments below, and I'll try and do a Q&A video as well.